to the live session on DevOps Testing tutorial by Intellipaat. But before we begin the session, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit on the bell icon so that you will never miss an update from us.
Today in this session, we're going to talk about what is software testing and then move on to understand what is Selenium exactly. After that, we're going to talk about Maven, which plays an integral role in creating automated tests in Selenium. Once we've understood Maven, we'll move on and talk about how we can create automated tests in Selenium. Once we have done with that, we'll move on and talk about TestNG, which is yet another important library that you will be using while you're performing tests in Selenium. And finally, we'll be talking about continuous testing, which basically is a part of the DevOps lifecycle, and Selenium perfectly fits in continuous testing, right? So we are going to discuss how Selenium fits in continuous testing and then move on to discuss how continuous testing basically fits in the DevOps lifecycle. After that, why do we need continuous integration, and then move on to understand what is continuous integration exactly. After that, I'm going to show you guys what is Jenkins and then discuss how you can set up Jenkins on your computer. After that, I'm going to explain you guys the master-slave architecture of Jenkins, and then we'll see how we can install the Jenkins master-slave on AWS. Finally, I'll show you guys how you can create a CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins, which will be triggered using a Git webhook. Alright guys, so this is our agenda for today. I hope it's clear to you. Let's move on and start off with the first topic, which is Introduction to Software Testing. So guys, software testing is basically used in the development practice since its inception. Whenever you work on something, there always have to be a QA on your work, right? And that is exactly what software testing is for, right? So software testing started off as a QA process, but then as and when the softwares became more and more complex, there were new problems that we had to face every day, right? For example, the time it used to take between, the development happening and then after that you testing the product, that time period used to be too long, and therefore there used to be some lapses in the release dates. If there was a release that was planned on a certain date, because of testing, because of back and forth between the development and the testing team, it used to take a lot of time, and hence the deadlines were not met, right? So these were some of the problems that were there in the software industry prior to software and testing becoming itself a domain and being so popular in the industry, right? So yeah, so there are basically two types of software testing in the industry where people work, right? So the first type of testing is automated testing, and the second type of testing is manual testing, right? I'm sure the name is clear itself about what testing is. So in automated testing, what happens is that you write code for your application to be tested on, right? For example, if you created a website and let's say you have to check the login functionality, what you will be basically doing is putting your email ID in the user text box and then putting your password in the password text box and then clicking on login, right? So after that, there'd be a screen which would basically say login successful or something like that. And basically, if this has to be tested, all you have to do is, if you think logically, we'll have to have a software which can enter the details in the username and the password, and then there has to be a software component which would basically click on the login button. And after that, login successful, if message is being displayed, that means the login functionality is working fine, right? So this is how we see it, that logically, if there was a software, these are the things that are supposed to be done. And if you can think logically for a process, or if you can define something using a process, using a sequence of steps, that can be done using automated testing. But there are always sides to a software which cannot be automated. Let's say you're doing a release feature, you're releasing a feature right now for which probably right now the automated tests are not developed. In those kind of scenarios, one opts for manual testing, right, where a person would sit down and would look at it from the UI perspective, from the UX perspective, also basically checking whether the functionality is working or not, right? So this is what manual testing was all about. Still today, manual testing is practiced in the scenarios which I just told you, where probably the test cases are not ready, or what happens sometimes is it is just not possible to automate a particular task, because let's say you cannot include it in a process. What cannot be included in a process? Let's say the output is always random, right? So if the output is random, you cannot tell a computer how to judge that output. So in those kind of scenarios, you need human interference, right? And for those human interference cases, you have manual testing, right? Automated testing, whenever you can create a test case using a process, for those kind of testing cases, we have automated testing. So these are the two types of software testing, guys. Moving forward, now we will be focusing our attention towards automated testing today, because since our topic of discussion is Selenium, and Selenium itself is an automated software testing tool, right? So we will be focusing our attention towards automated testing tools. Now, except Selenium, there are various automated testing tools out there in the market. You have something called as Appium, you have something called as Cucumber, you have something called as Test Studio, and there is Selenium itself as well, right? So why are we studying Selenium today? The reason for that is Selenium is most widely used in the industry right now, right? So if you're applying for DevOps job, most probably in your JD, you will find somewhere that, Selenium experience is a must, right? When you compare it with other tools such as Appium, Cucumber, Test Studio, although they are used in the industry, but they're not as prevalent as Selenium tool, right? And that is the reason we have tried to include Selenium as a part of your DevOps curriculum, because there are there is a more probability of you being asked whether you know Selenium or not when you're applying for a DevOps engineer profile than the other tools. All right. But if in the core essence you understand how testing works, I think it'll be very easy for you to migrate from one tool to another. In case you have to design automated test cases, but that will never be the case, because your profile, which is a DevOps engineer profile, you actually don't have to develop test cases. What you will be asked to do is design architectures wherein you will design the DevOps lifecycle. These test cases will actually be done by software testers, but as a DevOps engineer, you should have a background on what actually happens inside testing and how a particular tool works, so that when you're doing the automation, it is crystal clear to you the technical side of things as well as the architecture of side of things, right? Because you must have heard that whenever someone becomes a manager, it is essential for him to understand how the work is done by his subordinates, and only then he becomes a good manager, right? If you are a non-technical manager and if you're handling technical folks, chances are there'll be a lot of back and forth between you and your subordinates, right? So similar concept you can apply in learning Selenium today as well, that if you're a DevOps engineer, you should know how the tool works, so that if someone tells you that so and so thing is not possible, you can just go ahead and show them that this is the way it happens, right? And also this knowledge is also helpful while you're devising architectures. Moving forward, guys, now let's start off with Selenium. So guys, what is Selenium exactly? So Selenium is a portable framework for testing web applications. So Selenium provides a playback tool for authoring functional tests. Yes, so Selenium also gives you, let's say you're not that much into coding, and what you want to do is you want to perform a set of actions on the browser, and you automatically want them to be recorded in the background. So that is also possible using Selenium, but there has to be some extensions enabled, and using them you can also play back a certain action that you did on a website. For example, let's say I first go on Google, I search for a particular term, then I click on the first result, right? If I'm doing these actions, and if these are being recorded, these basically automatically get converted in the background into code. And then once you play back what you have just done, it automatically runs that code and repeats all the actions that you have done in the browser itself, right? So this is, guys, what Selenium is. So to summarize, it's only used for web application testing. It also gives you the flexibility of not writing code, and you can just have a playback tool for yourself wherein you'd be just doing the actions, and once you end that particular recording, you can play it back, and then all the steps that you did will be repeated. All right. So this is a gist of what Selenium is all about, guys. Now, Selenium was actually created by this guy, Jason Huggins, in the year 2004. But when it was created, it was actually something else. So what Jason Huggins was doing was he realized that he was creating an application and he was doing the same test again and again, right? So for his own application, what he did, he tried to create something of an automated testing tool kind of thing, wherein his application could automatically be giving the same inputs again and see what the outputs are, and hence he will know whether his code is working or not, right? So he wrote a JavaScript program for that, and then that's how Selenium came out to be. So the JavaScript that he wrote, the name of that application was actually JavaScript Test Runner, and once it was donated to open source, it was later named as Selenium Core. Okay. Now there were some limitations with Selenium Core, and we'll understand them as we move along. So guys, Selenium has these four components. As time progressed, these are the four components which came into Selenium, right? Because Selenium Core, like I said, it could not do the job alone. It had to have helpers. So we have something called as Selenium RC, we have something called as Selenium IDE, Selenium Grid, WebDriver. What are these components and what do they do? We'll understand it. Let's pick them one by one and understand what they're all about. So guys, Selenium RC was basically used because Selenium Core, when it was written, it had a disadvantage that it could only check websites which exist on the localhost domain. That means anything on any other domain, any website on any other domain, that could simply not be tested because of its limitation, right? So what was Selenium RC? Selenium RC was basically a proxy server. Now what does this proxy server do? It basically takes a website and it makes the Selenium core think that that website is actually on the local host, right? So this was the sole job of what Selenium RC was, and Selenium RC and Selenium core together were first named to be known as Selenium 1. Okay. After that, we got something called as Selenium IDE. So Selenium IDE was basically a Firefox extension in the beginning, which could do that playback feature of ours that we were just discussing a few moments back, right? So if you are not into writing code, what you can do is you can do some actions and then play back those actions using this particular tool, which was Selenium IDE. And this was devised by Shinya Kasatani from Japan. All right. So the intent of writing this particular program was to reduce the time that we take in creating test cases, because earlier it used to be hundreds and thousands lines of code for just creating the test. So it would basically mean if you're creating an application for a particular client, you're basically creating two applications in that case, one application for the client and one application for actually testing out that product. And sometimes it used to be that the size of your automated tests used to increase the size of your application, right? So for these kind of scenarios and the time which is also being invested in creating test cases, uh, this guy created Selenium IDE. Now the next component was Selenium Grid. Now because there could be multiple parts of an application that have to be tested, right, to reduce the time taken by the automated test also was long. Why? Because there were so many components to be tested throughout an application once a release was done. So Selenium Grid basically gave us the power of running tests parallelly when basically you were trying to automate something, or when you were trying to test something automatically, right? So Selenium Grid was an application which could help us test multiple parts of an application on multiple machines, right? And this reduced the time of testing an application drastically, because earlier what was happening was everything was in a queue process. So the first component would be tested, then the second component that would be tested, then the third component would be testing. Everything was happening on one particular computer. But with Selenium Grid, if you want to test an application, your code has to reside in one place, and from that one place you can just hit the test button and it will deploy the application on multiple machines with the different components that are to be tested, and accordingly the different components modules will be put on them for testing. And once the results were done, or the once we got the results, they were aggregated and given back to the server from where the test was started,
right? So this reduced the time of testing drastically. The next component was Selenium WebDriver. So Selenium WebDriver is the modern way of Selenium that we have, right? So the modern Selenium, it does not require a proxy server, right? It does not require you to have a queue system. If you want, you can put or you can test applications on parallel computers. That is what the modern Selenium software is all about. It's all consolidated, right? So Selenium WebDriver was basically a consolidated software, which was a combination of IDE and RC. And the way it worked better was that earlier what we were doing was we were interacting with the website through JavaScript. Now, and as the time progressed, the websites and the JavaScript and the browser itself were becoming more and more restrictive. And therefore, more and more releases were required with every browser upgrade or with every Java upgrade that, now the earlier product of ours is failing. We'll have to try something else. We'll have to try something new. And that is when, the WebDriver scene came in, wherein it said, okay, let's put everything behind and let's try to invent something new so that this problem is solved forever. So Selenium WebDriver, it directly communicates with your browser. So it's just like you communicating with your browser, clicking somewhere and doing stuff. Similarly, your Selenium software directly communicates with the browser. So there's no problem with JavaScript. There's no problem with the browser itself, because the browser will think a user is working. And nowadays, it's most of the browsers, they have they allow automated testing to be done, because that has now become a necessity for the software industry that we're living in, right? So whenever you would be running a Selenium test, you would see the browser giving you a notification that the browser is being controlled by an automated or an automation software, right? So now the browsers have allowed automation softwares to actually communicate with them. But the first interface which was created to basically interact with the browsers was through Selenium WebDriver. All right. Now, if you were to summarize how Selenium components came to be in the perfect shape and size that we use today, is like this: that earlier there were 4 components which were devised: Selenium Grid, Selenium ID, Selenium RC, and Selenium WebDriver. Then Selenium RC and WebDriver were merged, right? And it was made a consolidated software application where we need not rely on external tools for doing basically something which was a hack kind of a way, wherein, like, for example, we were creating a proxy server for the website that we had to test, so that the software could believe it's working on the local host. That's kind of a hack, right? But now with Selenium 2, when it came into the picture, when it combined RC and WebDriver's functionality together, it no longer seemed to be a hack. Probably in the backend, it's still happening in the same way. But as a user, I will not think, okay, so now I have to run Selenium RC so that this website will appear as localhost. No. So that all happens in the backend. You will not even realize what is happening. For you, it will be like you're running the test, the browser will open and the test will be executed. Now it works like that. And once Selenium 2 was released, we saw, okay, so now Selenium is working fine for us. More features and more bug fixes were done. And then we have the Selenium 3 that we are actually using these days. So any company who's using Selenium for automation these days are working on Selenium 3. All right. Moving forward, guys, now that we understand the history of Selenium and we understand, okay, so what all can Selenium do and what all Selenium cannot do, let us pause the technicalities of Selenium and let us understand what is Maven. So guys, Maven is very important component of your development practices that are followed throughout the world, right? Maven plays a very pivotal role. What role does it play? Let us understand that in the further slides. So guys, Maven is a build automation tool. So it helps you to build your software code, and it addresses 2 aspects of building software. First, it describes how a software is built, and the second, it describes its dependencies, right? So whenever you build a software, there are a lot of files that are working with it to basically give you the complete application. Like in our case, we are using Selenium, right? So for using Selenium with Java, so from if you're a Java developer, you might know that in Eclipse you can run your normal programs as well. It's just not for Selenium. So if you want to run a Selenium program, you'll have to download all the Selenium driver files, right? You will have to download. You will also have to install Maven in Eclipse. So there are a lot of things, or there are a lot of softwares that you install in a particular application for it to work, correct? So there are two things that Maven does. The first thing that it does is it downloads all the dependencies required, right? So you don't have to download each and every dependency separately and then put in a program and check whether it's working or not. What you can basically do with Maven is you can put all the dependencies in a code file, and you can just feed it into there's a file in Maven which is called pom.xml. Okay, so in that pom.xml file you can list down all your dependencies and it'll automatically download it from the internet. So this is primarily why Maven is used. Second thing is it also helps you to build your software application. What do you mean by that? So you might have seen that whenever you try to run a program which is a finished program, let us take an example of setups. So when you have, if there is any software that you have to install, you get a setup file for that. In that setup file you have a lot of files which are combined together. Similarly, when you're using Selenium, if you see if you create a program in Selenium and if you see the project that basically if you see the project folder, you'll find there are a lot of files in there, right? But if you actually see how Selenium tests are run, what you do get when you're running a Java Selenium file, you do get a jar file, right? The jar file is actually the final output of your automation project, right? So your automation project, let's say it has around 100 or 150 files. It'll be very difficult for you to keep track of all those files. So what you do is you build your software program, and in that what happens is you put all the files, you consolidate all the files inside one particular file which is self-sufficient to run. Okay, so in case of our Selenium project, what we'll be doing is we'll be exporting all our Selenium files, all its dependencies, all the code inside one file, one jar file, right? And that jar file can run on any system on which you have a runnable Java software installed, right? Whenever you have Java software installed, you'll be able to run that jar file. So Maven also helps you to build software files, and at the same time, it also helps you in dependency management. Okay, you'll understand more of it as we move along, as we move on to the hands-on part, where I'll show you guys that a project is actually empty. There's no Selenium files over there, and what we'll then do is we'll put a dependencies list in the pom.xml that Maven requires, and I'll just save the project, and you will see that it'll download all the files required in that project folder automatically. Okay, so that is primarily why Maven is so helpful. Okay, so some more information about Maven, that it downloads dependency for a software program. Basically whatever dependencies that you have to include in a program, you will be mentioning it in the pom.xml file. Once you have added the dependency in the pom.xml file, you just have to save the project and all your dependencies will be downloaded. All right. Now that is all the information you need about Maven, guys, to get started with the hands-on. I think whatever information that I've given you is enough for you to now get started with how to create a Selenium project, or how to get started into creating your own test cases. Okay, so what the first thing that you have to do is you will have to, when you're setting up the Selenium tools on your system, the first thing that you have to have is Java installed, right? So first you will have to install Java. Now, what version of Java can you install? You can install any version of Java. You just have to go to your Chrome browser, just search for Java download, right? So basically you need the JDK to be installed, right? You go to that particular website. Let's say we go to java.com/download, and then you will click on Java download. Then it'll automatically detect what system size you're on, and you can just click on agree and start downloading everything. I'm not sure it will download your JDK or not. In case it does not download your JDK, you can straight away go to your browser and type in download JDK for Windows, right? And then you will see this oracle.com page. You come here and then you can download this. Once you have everything installed, your next step would be to install Eclipse. Okay, now there are a lot of versions for Eclipse, guys. Prasenjit is asking me, can we use Mac for Selenium hands-on exercises? Sure, Prasenjit, you can install Java on your Mac and then install Eclipse on that system and it'll work like a charm. There are no differences. So the best thing about using Java with Selenium is, guys, that Java is platform independent, right? If I create a test case in Windows, you can run it in Linux, you can run it on Mac, you can run it anywhere. So that's the beauty of having Java as a programming language with you. All right, so once you've downloaded the JDK, guys, next step would be to install Eclipse. For that, just type in your browser Eclipse download, right? Like I said, there'll be a lot of options for you to install Eclipse. All right, so once you reach on this page, you can just click on the download 64-bit in case your system is a 64-bit system. Just click on this button and you'll be able to download Eclipse on your system. Once Eclipse is downloaded, when you'll click on the setup, you'll get a lot of options of different versions of Eclipse to be installed. What you have to choose is the Eclipse for developers, right? So it will have an icon just like this. If you can see in the screen corner, you can see it has an icon like this where it's a care kind of a symbol. You have to install this particular version, Java for developers, Eclipse for developers, and this already has Maven pre-installed in it. That is the reason we'll be installing this particular version. If I have to quote you the exact text, it would be Java for EE developers. I think that's the exact text. But the icon, if you want to analyze which version to install using the icon, this is the icon, guys. If you can see my taskbar as well, you can see that this is the icon, Java EE IDE. All right, so this is the name that you'll have of the Eclipse. You click on that, that will start installing, and once it's installed, you will get a UI which would be similar to this. You'll not see the code, but you will get a UI which is similar to what you're seeing over here. Okay, next thing would be to create a new project, right? Okay, so Preeti has a question where I can get the steps. Preeti, on your LMS, there would be some hands-on documents for setting up Selenium. So those would be the exact steps that I'm telling you right now. So if it's not available to you, you can just mail the support team. They'll surely send you on email whatever is required. So Saladhi has a question: which version of Eclipse are you using? I guess I'm using the 2018 version, Saladhi, but actually you can use any Eclipse version, that does not matter, right? Go ahead and about Eclipse ID version. So guys, this is the 2018, this is December of 2018 version, right? If this is the number that you're looking out for, it's 4.10.0. Okay, so but like I said, you can install any version that you want and it'll work the same. Guys, this was the icon that I was talking about, Java for developers, Eclipse for developers, Java EE IDE. This would be the symbol that you would be installing, and once you install it, you will have Maven pre-configured in your Eclipse. Okay, so once you have installed Eclipse, you have Eclipse just like this on your system. Next step would be to actually create a Maven project. Okay, you have to create a Maven project in order to be in order for you to use Maven in your code. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll click on File, you'll go to New, and then you will find Maven project over here. Okay, click on that Maven project. It will give you this kind of a screen where it will use the default workspace location. So usually that's in your documents, or it would be inside your users folder, right? So if you want, you can change it. In case you want to pursue the same, you can just leave it at default and you can click on next. Then it'll ask you about selecting something over here. Do not change anything, guys, leave everything at default, and you can just simply click on next. Then you will have to give a group ID and an artifact ID, right? You can give any name that you want. Like in our case, let me give it test, let's say Intellipaat, and let me say the test is test number 4. Okay, so it would work, and then finally you can click on finish. So this would create a new project for you. As you can see, a new test 4 project has been created, and you can see that there are if you double click on the Maven dependencies, you can just see there's a JUnit dependency which has been downloaded. Right now, for downloading all your Selenium dependencies, what you'll have to do is you'll have to go into pom.xml for your project. Remember guys, it would be inside your project, that pom.xml file. Double click on that. Now in this project, what you will have to do is go inside dependencies. As you can see, this is the dependencies tag, right? And what you'll have to do is you will have to replace or you'll have to add your dependencies between the dependencies tag. In my case, what I've done is I have all the dependencies which are required for Selenium to work. If you want, guys, I'm pretty sure this is also available in the document that I was talking about, where how to set up Eclipse, how to install Java and everything. This code is also there, but I've also put it in the chat box. So if anyone is doing the hands-on along with me, they can just copy this code, guys, and then you can just come back to your Eclipse IDE. Because JUnit is already a dependency which is there in my previous code, I'll just delete this dependency from here and I'll paste all the code over here in Maven. Okay, once I have saved once I have pasted all my code, just verify whether all the tags are being closed or not. So whenever there's a slash somewhere, that means the tag is being closed. So if there's a tag being closed, there has to be a starting of the tag as well, right? So you can see the dependency is starting, dependency and ending, and what is being downloaded is Selenium hq.selenium, and the artifact ID in this case is Selenium Chrome driver, right? Then you have Selenium API, which is being downloaded. Then you have Selenium server, which is being downloaded. All of these are dependencies which will be downloaded automatically. Okay. If I save the program now, you can see that all the dependencies are automatically downloaded on my Maven dependencies folder, as you can see on my left. Okay. So once all these dependencies are downloaded, you're good to go. You can start your Selenium project. You can start working with your Selenium project now. Okay. So you can just minimize Maven dependencies. So once you have all the dependencies in this folder, guys, next step would be to go inside your code. So the code would reside in source main Java. Just click on that, and then you will find a file which is called app.java. Just double click on that. Okay, and you would have some sample code which is already written over here. Right now, because you have all the dependencies downloaded, that would not mean that your code can simply use them over here. Okay, for using the dependencies, you will have to import them in your code. Okay, now what dependencies you will have to import? In my case, I actually did some googling. So guys, it's not important to remember what all you have to import, right? What you can do is you can start off by writing your Selenium code first, see the errors that you're getting, and then accordingly you can add the import lines. Okay, that's the way I do it. You can follow that way as well, because it is absolutely impossible to remember all these files, right? So it's better you do some Google with the error that you're getting, and you know what has to be done. Okay, in my case, I have to do these 4 imports. So one is TestNG I'll have to import, because TestNG, we'll talk more about TestNG as we move along. Then I have to import Selenium drivers, right? So one is by driver I'll have to import, then the web driver I'll have to import, and then the Chrome driver I'll have to import, because I'm using the Chrome browser today. Okay, so let's copy this code and let's try to paste it over here. Great. So guys, once you have done it, cannot be resolved. 1 second. Let me see what the problem is here at TestNG library. Great. All right. So now once you have imported, all the commands for importing have been put over here. Next thing is you can start off with your Selenium program. Okay, I'll be using this file for a reference. So always it has to start with public class app. In this is the new file that you would be getting. Public class app is what you'll be starting with. The main file, or when you're basically using TestNG, In TestNG, there is no requirement of the main function. Okay, so what you can simply do is you can remove the main function from here. More about TestNG, I will make you understand. Right now, just assume you just have to remove the main function, and you'll have to write something like this: @test. Why do we write it? I'll explain you as we move along. But right now, just understand you have to write @test. Okay. Under @test, you would be defining any function that you want. I'm basically getting an error. We'll fix it. Don't worry. Okay. So after @test, you will have to create a function that basically will be executing in your Selenium program. So as you can see in this particular diagram, before @test, you will have to import. So WebDriver is a library that you imported over here, right? So you will have to create an object of WebDriver. If you guys are not acquainted with programming, guys, it's totally understandable. Don't worry. The only thing that you have to take care over here is about the logic. Okay, so I'm just explaining you the logic. If you still don't understand, just understand that you have to include this line before @test. Okay, so let's include this line. Right, so now I have an object of the class WebDriver. All right, next step would be to put @test. We have done that, and then you will have to create a function which will basically do all the Selenium operations for you. Okay, let me run this file first, this particular file, and you'll know exactly what has to be done, and then I'll explain you each and every line which is over here. So if I run this program, this failed. Let me check why it failed. Okay, it says this version of Chrome driver only supports Chrome version 75. Great. I'll come back to this, guys. This is an error that we can only resolve once we have all the concepts in place. But what was the intent? The intent was to install Selenium as of now, and the intent was to install Java, Eclipse, and set up the Selenium dependencies in your system. I'm sure till this step, all you have to do is import the Selenium dependencies, create a Maven project, have the Eclipse installed on your system, have the Java installed on your system. If you're done till this step, then you're fine. We can move on. And then I will explain you this as we move along, because right now you will not understand what this error basically means. Okay, let me come back to my slides. All right, guys. So we have installed Java. We have downloaded and installed Eclipse as well for developers. We created the Maven project and we acquired the Maven dependencies. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so our next step would be basically to create automated tests. Right now, what is the process of creating an automated test in Selenium? The way you work with Selenium is, the first thing that you need to have is you will have to find an element first. So just look at it logically, and then we'll understand how it works in the code. Okay, so first thing that your program will do is it will find the element on which it has to do an operation. Right, how do tests works? You basically, let's say we have a website. On that website, on some text box, I'll have to insert something. So that is what, for inserting that document, first I'll have to find that element on the whole website. Let's say there's one text box that I have to enter some text in. How to find that text box on that web application is something that I'll have to do first. So I'll have to find the element, right? Second step would be to perform the actions. So in our case, the actions would be to put some text, right? The first step, finding the element, was to find that particular text box. Let's say I'm on facebook.com and I have to enter the username. Okay, so what would be step number one? Step number one would be to find the username text box on facebook.com. Okay, once I've found the text box, which is basically my element, next step, the second step, would be to perform the action. In my case, that is to put the email ID over there, to type the email ID over there, which I have, right? Then that is done. Again, there would be one more action that I'll have to click on login after entering the password. And then the third step, so all these two were actions. That is, I entered my email ID, I entered the password, and then I clicked on login. These were actions. Then the third step is testing and reporting. So once I've logged in, I'll have to test whether the login was successful or not. That is my testing part, right? So I test it, and then whatever is the result, I give it in terms of in form of a report. That is reporting. So that is all step number 3. Testing and reporting is step number 3. Step number 2 with perform actions. Step number 1 is finding the elements. And this same logic we will be following in our program as well, that we'll be writing for our Selenium test case. Okay. Next step would be, guys, to understand how can we find elements on on our web page. So the elements can be found using these following properties. You can find an element by its ID on a web page. You can find an element by its name on a web page, the class name, the tag name, the link text, the partial link text, and then the XPath. Okay. Now, what do I mean by all these elements? Let's go ahead and let's open a sample website. Let's say I open Facebook. I hope it's not logged in. Great. So over here, what I'll be doing is I will have a particular element over here. Then I'll have a particular element over here, right? So how do I know that I have to go to this particular text box, right? Or how do I know I have to go to this particular text box? So this can be done by right clicking on the web page and clicking on inspect. Okay. Once you have, once you are in the inspecting mode, what you can do is you can go to this particular icon, which says select an element in the page to inspect it. Let's click on that. And now I can click on any element over here and it will basically show me the corresponding code for that on the right hand side. Let's say I click on the email text box. Okay. So if I click on the email text box, this is the code which is highlighted so that I know, okay, so this is the code that I have to have a look at. Now, if I have a look at this particular code, what all do I get? Right? You can see the input type is equal to email. The class is equal to input text. Okay. The name is equal to email. The ID is also equal to email. The data test ID is equal to royal_email. So these are all the things using which I can find an element on my page. But how do I decide which one to use? Okay, that you decide by little R&D on the website. Let's say I inspect this particular text box as well. Okay, and let's see what all differences do I get over here. Can you see the input type is equal to password? Okay, so that is something which is different. Class is equal to input text again. Even the class over here was input text. So if I'm searching an element using the class, I will not be able to get to that particular text box because there are two text boxes with the same class. So I always have to pick an element that will be exclusive for that particular element, right? For example, in this case, uh, the exclusive part would be probably the name. The name over here is email and the name over here is pass. Or if we have a look at the ID, ID is also different. ID over here is equal to email and the ID over here is equal to pass. Okay, so the IDs are different. So I can either search the element using the ID or I can search the element using the name. To confirm this, let us also check a third text box. Let's say this also is expecting an email, right? This text box is also expecting an email. Let's check what the code says about this particular email or this particular text box. So the input type equal to text. Okay, great. Class is equal to input text. Okay, data type equal to text. Great. Name is equal to registered email. Okay, value is equal to true. Placeholder, etc., etc. So there's nothing which is in common in terms of ID and name when I compare it with my text box, which was over here, right? These two text boxes and this text box has nothing in common when I would consider the properties which are name and ID, right? So that is evident, right? So once you have done this kind of an R&D, you can go back to your terminal and you will know, okay, so when I'm working, when I'm working with this particular page, I can actually identify this username using that particular ID, which was that particular element, which was either ID or name, right? I can go to that particular, I can search the element using that particular thing, and I'll have to enter the value which corresponds to that particular field, which is either ID or name. Okay, coming back to our slides, you can see that if you have to find an element on the web page, these are all the things that you can look out for and see whether they are individual or they are exclusive for the element that you want to be on. And if they are, you can basically take that thing and you can include in the code, right? For example, if I have to find a button let's say I have to click on next on this Gmail page. Okay, if I have to click on next, I found out that the class of that button, it's unique to that particular button, which is CWAK9, right? This is the class which is unique to that particular button. So what do? I write my code to be driver dot find element by dot class. So if it has to be something else, let's say by XPath, I write by dot XPath. If it has to be tag, it will be by dot tag, by dot class, by dot name, or by dot ID. Okay, and then you start with the brackets, and in the inverted commas, you specify the value that you saw while you were inspecting the element. Okay, you put that value over here, and basically Selenium, when we will run Selenium, it will identify, okay, so that is where I have to go, and that is what I have to find. So over here, we're not performing any action, guys. We're just finding the element and we're storing it into a button or a variable called button, right? So that if there is any action that I have to perform, I can basically do that action on this particular variable. I don't have to write this particular line again. All right. Now, before moving on, guys, I also want you to pay attention to this particular element, which is XPath.
Just a quick info, guys. If you want to make a career in cloud and DevOps, then Intellipaat provides an advanced certification in cloud computing and DevOps by ENICT Academy IIT Roorkee, and it is taught by IIT Roorkee professors and industry experts. This course is designed to help you upskill and land in your dream job. Now, let's continue with the session.
Okay, now XPath is something which is basically a code which every element on your website will have and which will be always unique, right? But you cannot get XPath directly. What you'll have to do is you will have to install an extension for getting the XPath of an element. For example, let us say I have installed the extension already, right? For me, the extension is actually CrowPath. I'll show you how you can install this extension on your system, right? Let's say I click here, inspect element, and then I click on this particular input text. This is the XPath that I will get, okay? And all I have to do is I will copy this particular value. I will go to my browser, or sorry, my Eclipse IDE, and I will say find the element by XPath, and I will set the value of XPath to be what I just found on my browser, which is this. Okay, this is my XPath. Now, how do you install this extension for getting your XPath? If you're using Chrome, guys, there is an extension called CrowPath. So you just have to search on Google, write CrowPath for Chrome, right? The first link, just click on that. Since mine is already installed, it will not show me the option of installing. It will just show me an option of remove from Chrome. Just click here. It will add the extension to your browser. Once it's added, just restart your browser once, and then once you'll be clicking on inspect, you should be able to see CrowPath tab on the most right hand side of this particular tab. Click over there, and whenever you want to see the XPath of any element, just click on inspect, go to that particular element. Let's say I'll go to password now, so you can see the XPath for that particular element. It's this, and your XPath, guys, it will always be unique. Okay, so you can be rest assured, if I'm not able to figure out what is unique for an element, I can always rely on XPath. Okay, I hope it's clear to everyone. All right, let us come back to our slides, guys. All right, so guys, we have understood all these things, that whenever I have to find an element, I can find it using all these attributes. And among these attributes, if I have to find XPath, I'll have to install an extension in my browser. And then when I inspect it, I will be able to find the XPath, which is always unique for a particular element. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Next step is to perform an action. Okay, now that we have understood how to find an element on a browser, let's go ahead and perform an action on that particular element. Okay, so performing an action, it could be either you want to click on that element or you would want to write something in that element, right? So if you have to click, the function for that is click. Let's say this is what we did in our previous slide, that we were able to find that element. correct? Let's say I want to click on that element, so I will just have to write dot and then click in case I want to click on it. In case I want to write something in that element, I will have to write dot send keys over here, and in the brackets, in inverted commas, I'll have to put the text that I want to write in that particular text box. Then you have something called as clear. If there is a text box that you want to clear, you found that text box. Next thing you want to clear it, click, just write dot clear, and that will clear that text box, right? If you want to submit a particular information that you have provided in the text boxes, just find the button for submitting. You can either click use this particular function, which is click, or you can use this particular function, which is WebDriver. Sorry, submit. Okay, so once you use that particular function, you should be able to do as per whatever these commands correspond to. For example, if you want to click on that particular element, you would be able to click once you specify the click syntax over here. If you want to write something, just write send keys over here, and you'll be able to write in that particular element, just like that. All right. So this is how you perform action. So on this particular slide, we understand that we can do 4 things. We can either click on a particular element, we can either write in a particular element, we can clear a particular element, or we can submit the information using a particular element. All right. And the syntax would go just like this. Whatever the syntax was for finding, in just in front of that, just write dot and just write the action that you want to perform. And that would be it for performing an action on a particular element. Next thing would be to test whatever we have done. What is the output that we are getting? Next step is to check whatever we have got, right? So testing is basically done using TestNG. So you have Selenium for finding the element, you have Selenium for doing any actions. If you want to now do a test on the output, whether it's right or wrong, you use TestNG for that. Okay, now what is TestNG? TestNG is basically a testing framework wherein NG means next generation. Now it was inspired from JUnit, so it basically mimics to a certain level that whatever JUnit does, TestNG can mimic JUnit to a certain level, right? But basically, whenever you have found an element and you have done some action on it, now the next step when you have to do testing on it, you will be using TestNG for that. Okay, I hope it's clear with everyone. So guys, like I said, TestNG, whenever you have found an element and you have performed an action, now when you have to test whether that output is right or wrong, you use TestNG for that. Okay, so TestNG basically makes use of annotations. What are annotations? That @test that I wrote in my app.java over here. This is one type of annotation. There are numerous annotations. We'll understand each of these annotations as we move along. But for now, just understand that a feature of TestNG is that we have annotations. Why do we use them? We'll explain you as we move along. Okay, so TestNG has a mixed use of annotations, which helps us to create test cases easily. Then test cases can be grouped and prioritized more easily using annotations. Don't worry if you don't understand this, I'll explain you while I'm doing the hands-on. So TestNG supports parameterization, that is, you can pass parameters to TestNG. This actually would not make much sense for us while we're testing, but yes, this is a feature. It supports data-driven testing using data providers. That is, you can put some data on the testing application and you can check how your application is responding to that data. But this, we are using Selenium for this, but this again is a feature. You can use TestNG to provide data too, but the problem would be that for finding the elements, you would have to use Selenium. Okay, now once the testing is done, you can also generate HTML reports, which basically mean if a test failed, if you want to have a nice web interface to see where test failed and what exactly in that test failed, it supports HTML approach. So whenever you run a test using the TestNG framework, you will have the reports generated in the output folder of your project. You can check that folder, double click on it, and then you'll be able to see a HTML page where all the details of your test would be written. Okay, parallel text execution is possible, so that's self-explanatory, and it readily supports integration with other tools and plugins like Eclipse, build tools like Ant, Maven, etc. So TestNG can be used with Eclipse, which we are using actually, and it supports Ant and Maven. So we are using Maven in this project. So TestNG can be used with Maven as well. All right. Next step would be to setting up TestNG on our Eclipse dashboard. So let's do that. Now, if you have to set up TestNG, guys, all you have to do is you have to import this particular library, which is already there in your Maven dependencies, because that is the code that we pasted in the pom.xml file that automatically downloads the TestNG library. And because we want to use the annotations, right, in TestNG, we are specifically importing only annotations in our program, right? And that's how this thing would be able to work. Now, how does this work? We'll explain it as we move on the further slides. But how to set up TestNG, just include the code that I gave you in your pom.xml file. That will automatically download the files that are here. Then those files you will have to import in your code using this particular command. Once you have done that, TestNG is up and ready to use, and you can use it freely. Now let's understand how to use TestNG actually. So we would have set up TestNG by now by using this particular command. Let's come back to a browser, and now let's understand how can we use TestNG. So TestNG uses something called as annotations, which I told you are nothing but these kind of texts, which are @test or @before method or @before class. Why do we use them? Let's understand that. So as annotations in TestNG are used to decide the flow of the program, which means now your program can be structured in any sequence that you want, right? But what happens is if you specify annotations in TestNG, and no matter where your code is written, the annotation which has to execute first, the function which is below that annotation will execute first, irrespective of the fact whether it's in the end of the code, whether it's in the middle of the code, or whether it's in the starting of the code. Okay, so these are the annotations, guys, which are available in TestNG that mostly is used while you're creating test cases. You have something called as before shoot, you have something called as before test, you have something called as before class, before method, and @test. Okay, so what basically happens is that before suit executes in the very beginning. After that, you have before test, which executes. Then you have before class, that executes just after before test. And then you have before method, and then you have @test. Okay, so all your testing that you would be doing would be included in @test. Now, the one question that you can have in your mind right now is, why don't we just have @test? Why do we have all these methods or all these annotations? Why do we use them, right? So what happens is before a test has to be executed, it could be that you have to initialize some variables, right? It could be that you have to open the browser, you have to test something, or you have to basically to set up your environment in a certain way before your actual test runs. You have these annotations, right? So as we move along in complex software testing architectures, you would understand its importance, wherein let's say something has to be executed before the other code runs, right? So in those kind of scenarios, you can use annotations and you can specify that this line of code should run before the test has to run, or this function has to run before the test will run, right? And it makes your life easier when you have annotations in your hand, where you don't have to actually worry like where exactly should I add my code. You can add your code anywhere, until and unless it is under the right annotation, it will work perfectly as you desire it to be, right? That is why you use annotations. So just like if you have before shoot and before test, you also have annotations such as after shoot and after test and after class and after method, right? All those annotations you can also use. Now let's go on and let's try to run some annotations in TestNG. So basically we in this particular exercise, we will not be performing any test, but I basically just want to show you how annotations actually work. Okay. All right. So here we are in our code. Right now, @test is giving me an error. Let's try to define the code first, and let's try to fix the error after that. So let's say I define a function public void test. Let's say there's a function that I defined like this. See, as you can see, the moment I include a function here, the error is gone, right? So basically that error was saying that I don't have anything under my annotation. And that is why, it was popping an error to me. Now, what I want to do here is I want to print something on my terminal. So let's print system.out.println, and let's print, let's say, test is executing. All right. And let's put the semicolons in the end. Okay, so this function should basically work. Let's save the program. Let's try to run the program and let's see what the output is. Can you see it says test is executing? Great. Now let me add an annotation over here. Let's say I add an annotation which says @before test. Okay, and now let me write a function public void. Let's name the function as before. The naming of the function could be anything, guys. It could be random according to your choice. And now let's specify system dot out dot println, and now you specify, let's say, before test. This is the text that I want to print. Okay, I'm getting a warning over here. Let's see what the warning says. Import before test. Okay, all right. So the problem is over here. This has only imported the test annotation. If I specify a star over here, guys, it will import all the annotations which are there in the TestNG. Okay, so as you can see, the warning is no longer there. Now let's try to run this program. Now, if you go according to the sequence of the program, guys, we have this function first, and then we have this function. So ideally this should have run first, but because we are using annotations and whatever we have studied, if that is right, I should be seeing this text first, and then I should be seeing this particular test. Let's try to run it and let's try to see what happens. Okay, so my test has executed. Let us check the results. So as you can see, first it printed before test, and after that it printed test is executing. Although my code, according to my code, the sequence goes that first test is executing is written, and then before test is written. Okay, so guys, this is exactly why we use annotations to specify the sequence in my program. All right, one second, guys. Okay, all right, guys. So I think I missed one step for you guys. So basically, when I am importing the dependencies, so the code that I gave you, it does not have TestNG in it. Okay, and that is why UMA is getting an error, which is import TestNG error. So if you want to install TestNG manually on Eclipse, what you can do is you can just go to help, and you can then go to install new software. Okay, so once you're over here, now you'll have to enter a URL over here. The URL that you have to enter would be beust.com/eclipse. Okay, and then hit enter. So once you do that, you will find that in this particular space you will have TestNG. Just select that and click on next. Just to follow the normal installation wizard procedure, you click on next. It will install TestNG in Eclipse for you, and I guess Uma, that would solve your import error that you're getting on TestNG. So just try that, Uma, and let me know if that works out for you. I'm sure it'll work out. The URL to be entered is beust.com/eclipse. Okay, and install each and every file that you see over there. All right, moving forward, guys, let me just come back to my Eclipse. All right, great. So now what we have done, I lost the app.java file. Yes. So we have tried @test. We have tried @before test. Let's see the other annotations also that we have. Okay. So we tried on test we tried on before test. Let's try on before method and see what is the execution sequence for that. Okay, so I won't care about the sequence here. I'll just write before method, right? And now what I would do is I will define a function below it, public void before method. So the name of the function does not impact anything, guys. You don't have to worry about that. And let's say I print something over here. Let's say I print system dot out dot print ln, and let's print before method is executing. Let's put a semicolon and we're done. Let's save the program and now let's click on run. So you can see that first before test ran, then before method ran, and then test ran. So before method is just before your test. So your test method, just before your test method executes, you will have to run before method, and your before method will run, and before your before method you will have before test which is running. So whenever you're planning on putting some dependencies that are related to your actual test, if you have to sequence them, you'll have to sequence them like this. The next annotation that we have is before suit. So let's understand that. And then we have before class as well. So let's put all these annotations together. Let's put before suit and let's put before class, and let's see how the execution method sequences. So let's first put before class. Let's define the function public void before class. This is the function. And let's say what I'm doing is I'm printing this statement with this would be before class is executing. Similarly, let me just copy this, put it here, write this as before method, before suit, change the method name also as before suit, and change the text as before suit. Great. Anything else that we're missing? We've included suit, we've included test, class, method, and test. Great. Now let's save the program, run the program, and see what the sequence is. Okay, so first the suit is running. Before suit is the first order of execution. Then we have before test. Then we have before class. Then we have before method. And then finally we have test. Now let me show you something very interesting, guys. So let me come back to my code. And what I'll do is I'll write one more test annotation. Test. Let me write public void. And let's say the function is test2, right? This is the function. Let me write system.out.println, and what I want to print is test2 is executing. Now let's see how this works. Okay, let me save the program. Let me run the program. Great. So as you can see, the total test runs are now 2 because there are 2 tests in my program. So first before suit is executing, then before test is executing, then before class is executing, before method is executing, test is executing, then again before method is executing, and then test2 is executing. Can anyone tell me why this is happening? So basically all these have executed once, but my before method is executing twice. Okay, Arun says parallel. Okay, Salary says once can you give the link to install the software of TestNG? Sure, Salary. Let me just give it to everyone. So it's bust.com/. Guys, so Arun says because it's running in parallel. Okay. Others, can you tell me why there are why before method is executing twice over here? It's okay, guys. You can at least try. It's the most that will happen. It will be wrong that you're saying, right? So if anyone can tell me why before method is executing twice. Okay, so Subramani says because you have 2 tests. Okay. Samsundar says we have 2 methods and it ran twice. Uma says before each test methods. Okay. Murli says because before test method runs before any test method inside the test tag is run. All right. Deepak says because we have two tests. Samsunda says if we have three, it will run three times. Okay. Karthik says, is it a prerequisite before running test? All right. I guess most of you got it right, guys. So basically, the reason for that is because we have two tests, right? We have two times method which is running. Now, what does it tell us about the annotation at the rate before method? If you have 5 tests in your program, at the rate before method will run 5 times before it will run your test. But that is only limited to at the rate before method and at the rate after method as well, right? For example, if I write at the rate after method, okay, and let's say I find the function over here, and let's give the print statement as well over here. This is the print statement, and this is after method is executing. All right, let me check, guys. Let us see the way it works. So let me save the program and let me run the program now. Okay, great. So if I scroll up, I have before suite, before test, before class, before method, test is executing, after method is executing, before method is executing, test2 is executing, and then that after that I have after method is executing. So I guess most of you, almost all of you were right. So the after method, see, if my before method is running before test, right? So before method, obviously test will run. And once the test is done, after that, you will have the after method, which would be running. Now let's try putting the annotations for all the at the rate before class, at the rate before. Let's try to put at the rate after test. Okay, and now let's try to write public void after test, and now let's try to print the program. Right, this would be after test is executing. Now, according to you guys, when will this come? Will this come after the test or will this come after the method? Where will it come? And how many times will it come? Okay, guys, let's try it out. Let me save the program and let me run the program now. Now let's check the output. So after test is executed once, after method is executing, we test to before method, after method, test executing and before method. Great. So after test is only executing once. Can someone tell me why? Okay, guys, let me clear the air for you. So after test only executed once because before test also was only executed once. Do you get that? So before test and after test are basically complementary methods or complementary annotations. When you had two tests, what was executing twice? Your before method was executing twice, right? That would mean my after method obviously will execute twice, but because my before test method was only executed once, my after test method will also execute only once. Okay, that is the reason. Okay, so we were done with annotations. So what we did was we started to understand why my after test method was executing only once. And the reason for that was because before test method or before test annotation was also executing only once, right? And that was the reason we were only getting it once in our output. So we can verify that. As you can see, after test is only executing once. All right, guys, I think we have now understood how annotations work and why are they exactly used. Let me come back to my slides. So we have understood what annotations are, guys, and we have successfully done a working hands-on exercise on annotations with TestNG. Now let's move forward and now let's create an automated test with TestNG. So now we know how to find elements, we know how to perform actions, we know how to do the testing using TestNG as in using annotations. Now because we are a go with all the commands, how to find elements, how to perform actions, and how to do tests, let us go ahead and do this particular exercise. Now, while we're doing this exercise, guys, you'll learn a lot of new things as well. So I want you to pay a lot of attention over here. So the first thing in this demo that we have to do is that I have to open a website, which is Intellipaat.com. Okay, let's go step by step. Let's try to just focus on step one right now. Let's try to open Intellipaat.com automatically using my program. Okay, so I'll come back to Eclipse. All right, and let us just have @test method for now. So what I can do is I can remove before suite. I can remove after test. I can remove before class. I can remove after method. I can remove before. Okay, let's try to keep these. And let's say what I want to do over here is, one second. Okay, so the first thing that I have to do is how I have to tell my driver how to open the browser and exactly which browser to open. Okay, so for that, what I can do is I can quickly just show you the syntax for that. Okay, so the first thing that I'll do is I'll have to set the property. That is, I'll have to tell where exactly or how exactly to open Chrome. Now, for opening any browser, guys, you will have to download the driver for that particular browser so that your program is able to interact with that particular browser. Okay, in our case, if I want to connect to Chrome, I will have to download a Chrome driver, right? And that Chrome driver I will use to basically connect to my browser. So in this case, once I have told my program where the Chrome driver is, I will initialize a new Chrome driver variable. And then this is the command to go to any URL. You have to type in driver.get and then you have to specify the URL. Okay, so in our case, we have to go to intellipaat.com. Now, let me show you the error which is happening over here, which you might also face while you are setting up your program. Okay, so it says session not created. This version of Chrome driver only supports Chrome version 75. Now, how do we fix this kind of an error? So it supports only Chrome version 75. Now, let me check my browser version. I can go to help. I can go to about Google Chrome and I can check my version of Google Chrome is 74. Okay. Now for this, what will I have to do? I will have to download the Chrome driver for my particular browser. Now, how will I do that? I will type download Chrome driver over here in my browser. The first link, let's click on that. And now I will have all these versions. So I have Chrome driver 75, I have Chrome driver 74. Now this is the driver that I need to get with regards to my browser, which is also 74. Let's click on this. When you click on that, you will reach this kind of a page wherein you can choose which Chrome driver to download based on whichever operating system you are on. You can choose the Chrome driver. Okay, so in my case, the Chrome driver that I'll be downloading is this one, the Windows version, right? Let's click on that. And as you can see, my Chrome driver is now being downloaded. It has downloaded successfully. Let's try to open it. Let's try to extract it. Okay, this is my Chrome driver, guys. Now what I'll do is I'll just change the folder name. Let's change the folder name to, let's say, something as Chrome 2. Okay, here is where my Chrome driver exists. Now let me come back to Eclipse and now let me just change. So you will have to enter the path over here for your Chrome driver. My path is in downloads and it's in Chrome 2. Okay, let's save the file. And now let's try to run the program once more. Can you see it's going to facebook.com as specified? Great. So that means my program is running. Okay. Now let us try to replicate this in this new file that I created while I was working. Okay. So the first thing that I have to do is I'll have to set the property for Chrome. So the command for that is system.set. Okay, we can see the syntax from here. So the syntax is, yeah, system.set property. And then you will have to specify this line, right? Let's specify this line. Okay, so this is very important, guys. WebDriver.chrome.driver, and this has to be imported over here. Okay, WebDriver. You also have the Chrome driver over here. So this Chrome driver actually needs an executable to run, right? It does not mean it will download the executable also. Okay, so Prasanjit says why the driver path in the file system uses double backward slash. Can't we use single slash? So you can use single slash, Prasanjit, but in Windows it always works like this. Not sure why, but it works like this. If you are into Linux, then of course you will have to specify the forward slash, and over there the single slash will work. But while you're in Windows, always the double slash will work, and it's not like you have to specify this. Let me show you something. So if I go to Chrome 2, let me copy this path. Let me remove the path from here. Okay, and let me now paste it. Can you see it puts double slash? I think the double slash is to escape the character, right? So for escaping a character, you have to put a backslash. So this backslash could mean something else. And what we want the code to understand is that we want that it's a path that we are specifying. So if we want to escape the functionality of a particular symbol, we again specify backslash in front of it. Okay, and that is why double backslash is coming. But you can easily see I didn't specify backslash separately. If I delete it and if I copy the path from here where I have only singles backslash, if I paste it over here, it automatically makes it double backslash, right? So because this is the directory path, now I also have to specify the executable, which is chrome driver.exe. Great. All right, Prasanjit, great. Thanks for the confirmation. All right, now let's go ahead and so my system.set property is done. Next step would be to initialize my Chrome driver. So that I can do using this line. Let's paste this line over here. Great. Next line would be to go to the particular address that we have to go to. So we'll type in driver.get and let's specify this as www.intellipaat.com. Intellipaat.com, and let's check whether if you go to Intellipaat.com whether it's HTTPS or whether it's HTTP. Okay, so it is HTTPS. So you'll have to take care of this thing, guys. When you're specifying the URLs, you have to take care whether it's HTTPS or HTTP, and the same thing you'll have to specify over here. So our step one is now done, guys. Let us check if our code is now running. Let's save it, and now let's execute the program. Okay, so the browser is getting opened. The net seems to be a little slow, but all in all, I think you can get the idea that we are able to go to intellipaat.com, right? I'm not sure why it's taking such a long time, but okay, so yes. So I'm able to go to intellipaat.com. Now let's see what our next step is. So let's come back to our slides. 1 second. Yes. So our next step would be to enter DevOps term and click search. Okay. So on my website, which is this, I have to click on this particular text box and I have to enter DevOps over here. And then I have to click on search. Okay. So there are three actions involved over here. First, I will have to click on this text box. Then I will have to write in this text box. And then I'll have to click on search. Okay, so these are the three things that I have to do. Let's go one by one. So I'll come back to my Eclipse IDE, and now let's try to enter this. So the syntax for that is driver dot find element, and what do we want to find it by? The easiest that I told you is using XPath. So what we can do is we can click on the search bar and we can click on inspect, and then what we can do is we can go to CrowPath. I'm not getting that over here, probably because I was in the automation browser window. So if I go here and if I click on inspect over here, and yes, I should be able to find CrowPath. And now let's click on that particular text box. Here's the CrowPath, guys. XPath, guys, sorry. So we'll copy this XPath and let's now try to paste it by dot. Now what do we want to find it by? I want to find it by XPath. Here's the command, enter. right? And now it says XPath expression, put double quotes, inside double quotes, put your text, and now put a semicolon after it. Great. Now this is just the finding part. What do I want to do with it? I want to actually click on it. So I'll say dot click, and then I'll say the function is this. So now my program, what will it do? It'll open Intellipaat.com. It'll then go to then go on the web page, and it'll try to find this particular element with this particular XPath, and then it'll finally click on it. Great. This is what we want. Let's go ahead and try it, right? So let me save the file. Let me run the file, and let's see what happens now. So can you see the cursor actually is now on this, right? Which means my Selenium successfully clicked on this text box. Great. So it's working fine. Now let's go ahead and now let's enter some value into this, right? Let us copy this particular syntax. Let's paste it again. And now let's remove click. And now let's try to specify send. So the beauty of Eclipse is the moment you're trying to type something, it'll give you the suggestions automatically. It'll also give you how to use that method, right? What is that method doing? Character sequence to send the element. Great. I'll just hit enter and it'll autofill it for me. And now what I have to enter is the data that I want to search or that I want to enter in that particular text box. So the text that I want to search for is DevOps. Let's save it. And now let's try to run the program. Let's see what happens. Okay, so Intellipaat.com is open. Great. So DevOps also has been typed by my program. Great. Now next step is to actually click on search. Okay, let's do that. Let's go back to our code. Again, what we'll have to do is we'll have to copy the same command. No, not this command actually. Driver.find element by .xpath. Let's copy only till here. Next step, let's paste it. Now we want to find the element. Now what is the element that we want to find? The element we want to find is search. So let's close this window first, this window as well. And now let's see what is the XPath of our search button. So this is the XPath of my search button. Let's copy this. By XPath, we'll search this particular button. What do I want to do with this button is I want to click on it. And that's it. I think we forgot a bracket here. Let's put that bracket. All right, we're all set. Great. So now what it'll do, it'll go to Intellipaat.com. It'll click on the search bar. It'll type DevOps in that search bar, and then it'll click on the submit search button. Great. Let's go ahead and try this now. Let's save the program, run the program. So it opens a browser, opens Intellipaat.com, enters DevOps, clicks on search, and now you're on the search page. Great. So I think half of our hands-on is now done. So we opened the browser, we went to Intellipaat.com, we searched for DevOps, we clicked on search, and we reached the search page. Now let's see what is the next step in a slide. On the search page, check for DevOps certification course. If it exists, then click on the course. Okay, so what that basically means is that I will have to go to DevOps. So if I click search DevOps here, if I click on search, it should be able to find something of this sort, that is DevOps certification training, right? Let's try to see the XPath for this. This is the XPath for that, right? Let's copy it. And now what I want to do is, this is the XPath. This is the syntax. And what I want to do is I want to check the element. If it's there, I'll want to click on it. Great. If it finds that element, it will click on it. If it doesn't find that element, it will not click, and therefore it will hang basically on that page. And we'll see how that goes in a little moment. But for now, if it exists, click on the course. We did that. On the course page, verify if the page DevOps certification training is present as the header. Great. Now, how will you do that? So that basically means once I'm here, I've clicked on it. the header over here, it should be DevOps certification training course. Okay, we'll figure this out. First, let's see if it is able to click on the DevOps certification course icon. Let's save the program. Let's run the program now. So we are going to intellipaat.com. We will, once the page load is complete, it will execute the second step, which is writing DevOps. It clicked on search and it went on the DevOps certification training page. Great. Now it has to check whether this particular text is present or not. Now, how can we test that? So now we'll be making use of TestNG. So there is a command which will basically help you to check, which is called assert equals in TestNG. Let us see the syntax for that. So one second, guys. Okay.
Just a quick info, guys. If you want to make a career in cloud and DevOps, then Intellipaat provides an advanced certification in cloud computing and DevOps by ENICT Academy IIT Roorkee, and it is taught by IIT Roorkee professors and industry experts. This course is designed to help you upskill and land in your dream job. Now, let's continue with the session.
This is how you use assert equals. So first you specify the place on the web page where you're getting the title from. Second thing is you specify the actual title. Now, if this returns a true value, then your test passes. If this returns a false value, then your test fails. Let's try to use this. So I'll just copy this code. Let us try to paste it over here. And it says assert, we'll have to import. Okay. Import testng.assert, we'll have to do this. Great. And now, great. So now the error has been, it is only this warning that I'm getting for this particular variable because I'm not defined this. So the actual title has to be string actual title. This would be equal to, now let's go back to our slide. So it says verify if the page DevOps certification training is present as header. So DevOps certification training, this is the actual text. Let's copy it, let's paste it here. DevOps certification training colon, and again this also we will change to the text that we want. Okay, so now we will have to check whether this text is present or not in the header. Okay, so let me just go to my, so this is the text that we want to check whether it's present or not. And the way we can do that is let's inspect. Because this is the automation window. Okay, so I will select this text, right? And I can see that the XPath for this is this. Okay, let's copy it. Let's come to our page. So what we'll do now is we'll again try to find an element, driver dot find element by XPath, the value for which is this, right? And what I want to do is I want to get the text from this particular web element. Okay, I close it. Because I'm getting a text, I'll have to store it somewhere. So let's say I define a variable string actual value is equal to what I'm getting from this particular XPath. Okay, and then what I do is I specify that variable over here. So it will be actual value that I'll be specifying here. Great. So now what is happening is it is basically finding my element and it is storing its value in actual value. And then what it is doing is it is trying to find, it is trying to basically check whether my this variable and this variable are same. If it's not, then it will fail the test. If it is, then it will pass the test. Let's try to do this. So we'll save the program and let's try to run the program. Okay, so it will go to intellipaat.com. Now it will search for DevOps. It will click on the course page and now it should have checked. Now, how should we know that our test passed or failed? We'll have to check in the console. So it says failures 1. Let's try to understand why. So if you go up, it says expected DevOps certification training, but found DevOps certification training course. Okay, if we come back to our page, okay, so actually the text says DevOps certification training course, right? And let's specify the actual title to be DevOps certification training course. Let's see if it passes the test now. We'll close the window and let's try to run the program now. So go to Intellipaat.com. Also remember guys, until and unless your web page is fully loaded, it will not execute the second command. So it waits for your page to execute first and then it gives you a output. So you can see it says total test runs were 1, failures are 1. Let's check why. So let's go up. So it says it expected DevOps certification training course, but it found DevOps certification training course. Okay, all right. That it is case sensitive. So over here in my website, I can see the O is capital and even the O which is here, I've specified it to be small, right? So let's specify that capital O. Let's save the file and let's try to run the file again. So it'll open the browser. It'll go to Intellipaat.com. It'll wait the page to load fully. Then it'll search for DevOps, click on search, then go to the page. And now it should. Yes. So now, as you can see, the failures are 0 and the test runs are 1. And if we go up, it says the test has passed. Okay. Now, what you can also do over here, guys, is I can go to source. One second. I can actually see the HTML output for this as well. So I think that should be somewhere here. Just give me one moment, guys. Let's search once. Where is exactly a TestNG report generated? TestNG report generate, not generated or generated path on Eclipse. Okay, there should be a test output over here, and the way we can get that, okay, let's check. So this was an app and this is basically in test 4. Okay, refresh. Yes, so we have the test output folder now, and now we will have to go to TestNG results. There should be an HTML file over here, index.html. Yes, here it is. Just click on that, go to properties, and here's the path. Just copy that path and just try to run it in your browser. So I'll just go here, I'll run path, and as you can see, it says test results one suite, default suite, and what I want to check is this pass methods show, and as you can see, it says the test has passed. Now let's try to fail the test. Let's see how that goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for something else. Let's see how it goes. So I'm going to search for AWS. Let's save the file, and now let's click on run. Okay, so now it will open the browser, go to Intellipaat.com. Instead of DevOps, now it is actually going to search for AWS. It will click on search. It will come here, and since it will not be able to find, or it will not be able to find DevOps certification training, it will not go to that particular page. And as you can see that failures are 1. If I come back to my TestNG report, if I refresh this, you can see that the test has failed, and you can actually see why it failed over here. So you can see that no such element, unable to locate element which should have DevOps certification training course, right? And that is why your test is failing. So you can just see why your test is failing over here and accordingly make changes to your application. Okay, so guys, this was the hands-on that we were supposed to do. Let's come back to our slides. All right. Our next question is, guys, that we have to run the test that we just made in a headless mode. Now, what is a headless mode? Headless mode basically means that right now we can see that the browser is opening, right? But I don't want the browser to open. I basically want it to execute in the background. And how is it helpful where the browser is not opening? How is it helpful? That is particularly helpful when you're running tests on a command line operating system. Okay, like for example, right now we have a graphical user interface, correct? And because we have a graphical user interface, we can see the browser opening. We can actually go to a particular domain and check everything out. But what if you are on an operating system where you don't have the access to the browser or the user interface? So in those kind of scenarios, we run the browser in a headless mode. Okay, that is the only option that we have with us. Now, how to run a browser in headless mode? So obviously when you're coding your Selenium test, uh, at that particular time, if you're testing it, you can test it on your computer which has a GUI. You can check whether Chrome is opening, everything is functioning fine or not. When your program is full and final, when you know that it's executing without any trouble for whatever edge cases you decide, after that, what you will do is you will come here in your code and you will go to this particular line where you have defined the Chrome driver option. Okay, after this, you will have to define the Chrome driver options wherein you will specify the headless mode. Now again, there's a syntax for that. We can just quickly check that syntax online. Headless mode Selenium Java. Okay, in headless browser, and then we can just check the syntax for that. Yeah, so here it is, options dot add arguments, and first you will have to define this particular line. Let's specify that. This is the line that we'll have to specify, and after that you will have to include the option headless in your WebDriver, which should be over here. So this line will basically come after options, and here you will specify this particular variable, that is options. Great. Once you have specified that, let me see what the warning says. So it says import Chrome options. Okay, let's import it. So as you can see, this line has automatically been added once I clicked on that extension. So now basically my browser should not open, yet my test should run. Let's check how that goes. Let's save the program and let's try to run the program now. So now, as you can notice, there's no browser which is opening, right? So once the test is complete, you'll get the output in this console, and that's when you will know that, okay, so my test has completed. All right, so it says failures 1, so your test has failed, and this information you got without having to open the browser. So if you can go to my TestNG result, I'll just refresh the result, and it says unable to locate element, which is this, and the reason for that is I did not change this text. So let me change it to DevOps. Okay, let's save the file, and now let's try to run the test again. Okay, it still has failed the test. Let's check why. So it said element click intercepted, element ahref title, which is this, is not clickable at point 184.592. Okay. Other element would receive the click, info stripe, nav par, fixed bottom nav. All right. This particularly happens when there's a resolution problem. So what we can do is let's remove this options as of now, and let's try to run it in the browser mode to see where exactly the problem is occurring. So opens, it's entering DevOps, it's searched for it. Okay, so problem lies here where it's not able to click on this particular page, and that's when the failure is occurring. Great, let's solve this. So the way to solve this, guys, is to maximize your window so that the resolution becomes the same. Now, how can you maximize your window using Selenium? there is an option for that. Maximize Chrome window Selenium, and over here you should have the options that add arguments. Let me just search for Java. Okay, and the syntax over here is this is the syntax that we want. Driver.manage.window.maximize. We'll come back here and we will open Intellipaat, and after opening Intellipaat we'll just maximize the window. Great, this should work now. Let's check. Let's try to run the program. Okay, so it's opening Intellipaat.com, and after it is opened, it should maximize the window. Great, search for DevOps. Now it is able to go into this page, and after that, you can see the test has passed. Great, now let's just specify options over here, and now let's check if the headless mode test also passes. Okay, it says failure. Let's check why. All right, let's try to run it one more time, guys. Save it, run it, and now let's check. Still failing. Okay, now why is it failing? To verify that, let's try to copy this error and let's try to run this on Windows. Now I'll have to remove some things from here, like the title, which is not going to be generic. Even this I'll have to remove. Other thing that I can remove is this particular thing. Okay, what else can I remove from this query? Even this is not required. And what else? That's it. Okay. Okay, so it says this is caused by following three types. The element is not visible to click, which is true in our case because it's in headless mode. So use actions or JavaScript executor for making it to click. All right. Page is getting refreshed before it's clicking the element. Page element is clickable, but there is a spinner overlay on top of it. I think the first should not be a problem. Reason being, it is able to go to DevOps. It is able to search for DevOps and click on the search button, but it is not able to click on the DevOps certification page. Correct? So let's verify. Element is clickable. There is a simple spinner or overlay on top of it. One more problem there that could be, guys, it could be because of the multiple instances which are open in our background. Let us remove options and check if our test passes again. Open Intellipaat, maximize the window, this, search for DevOps, click on the DevOps course. Okay, it is yet not again able to click here. Great, so this seems to be the problem. All right, no worries, let's try to fix it. Let's close the window. Also, let's check how many Chrome windows are open. Okay, so it says there are 66 instances running. Okay, this seems to be the problem. Let's try to end this task. Great. So Chrome is now closed, and to avoid getting this problem, what we can do is that we can close our Chrome browser once our test executes. So basically what we'll do is we will add an annotation at the rate after test, and then what I can do here is I can close the window, right? But that would be a problem. Why? Because the scope of the program limits my driver to be defined inside this. So let's try to close the window here itself. So let's try to close or exit the browser. Exit Chrome Java Selenium. Let's try to search for this. And this is the syntax, guys. Let's try to quit the driver. Great. And this should happen after the test, but let's try to define the driver before that. So this can go here. One second, guys. So this is, if it's executing here, it's fine. and then we have to go to Chrome options. Okay, let's try this. So this would run after test, and this would be basically public void close Chrome, the function, and let's see how it works. Let's run the program, and obviously this has to be without the options so that we can see what is happening. I went to Intellipaat.com. It should then maximize the window, search for DevOps, was able to click on DevOps now, and it closed the window. Great, so it's working. Now let's try to add options over here. Save the program, and now let's try to run it. Okay, it again failed. Let's check the problem. Element click intercepted, element which is this, DevOps certification training, title which is this, training course. So the problem seems to be occurring on this particular option, driver.find element where the front page submit search. No, actually it's happening over here where the element of ahref DevOps certification is not clickable. Other element would receive the click, which is this ahref. Okay, let's try to search this on our code to understand where exactly the problem is occurring. It could be that the XPath for that particular thing is not working, but let us check. If it is able to click the search button, it should be able to click over here as well. And now what I can do is I can do a control F. And I can search over here, console, sources, network. Okay, if I do a view page source, correct, this is the code. And if I inspect this, this is what I'm trying to click. What if I change the XPath to actually click on the image? Let's try that. Say this is the XPath that I would be clicking on in that case. Let's try to copy this into the XPath of this code, save it. Let's try to run it now. So Prasenjit says there's overlay, I suppose. Let's check Prasenjit once. So the text executed. Oh, the test executed fine now, guys. So the problem was with that element. Basically, that element, I guess what Prasenjit is saying is right. That what is happening is when you come here, there's an overlay of this particular element, right? And hence it becomes unclickable. Can you see? I cannot click here now. I can only click if I come quickly on this particular page. So what I've done now is I have given the XPath for this particular image. So this is clickable, but this is not clickable, and hence I guess this is the problem, right? So now it's supposed to be working. This is options is enabled. So let's try to run it one more time so that we know that this was the problem. Save the program, run it, and it's executing in the backend. Great. So as you can see, the test has now executed successfully. And if I go to the test output, which is in the properties of this particular path, I can see the test has passed and it executed successfully. Great, guys. So I think I'm sorry I had to troubleshoot a bit this website, but I guess we have solved that problem. The problem was that whenever the mouse was coming back here, it was becoming unclickable, this particular element. So sometimes if the mouse came fast, it could have clicked here, but if in most cases, if this element appears before that, it is not able to click, right? So what we did, we changed the element to the image so that it becomes clickable. And that's what we have changed in the code as well. We changed the XPath to the image of what we are going to click, and then it works like a charm. All right, now talk about continuous testing. So we have successfully ran the headless test in Selenium, and now I guess most of you guys know how to create a test in Selenium. We have also encountered a lot of errors, so you guys know how to solve errors as well. Next step is, what is continuous testing? So guys, we know how to do testing, but what is continuous testing exactly, and how do you integrate what you have learned right now with DevOps? Okay, so for that, what we do usually, so let's first understand what continuous testing is. So the process of continuously testing while a DevOps cycle is being executed, that is, like, if you would have studied DevOps so far, you would have seen that if I want to test my application, if it's working or not, how will I test it? I'll basically commit on my GitHub, right? And then that GitHub will basically trigger my Jenkins to deploy my application on the testing server. And on that testing server, what you do is you test, or you run the test that you have created on your application, right? Then and there, you will get either a failure or a pass message. If you get a failure message, you will know that, okay, I have to do some changes and I have to write my code again. You do those changes, you again commit it on GitHub, again your Jenkins will deploy that application to the test server, and on the test server, then again your Selenium code will be ran against your application, right? And if the test passes, it automatically will push that application to production without giving you a message that your application has failed or not. But you will do get a message that your test has passed. You can do two things over here, guys. You can either set a trigger so that your manager will review what you have done, the test cases have passed, and then you push it to production. Or if it's a very mature DevOps lifecycle and the test cases are to the point, in that case, what you can do is, on a successful test case, when all the test cases pass successfully, it can be automatically be pushed to production. That can also be configured. So this process of continuously committing on your GitHub so as to improve your application so that it can test the past test cases, this is called continuous testing. Now imagine when 10 or 15 developers are working and everyone has their own testing environment, there'll be a lot of testing going on, right? And when you become part of this kind of a DevOps lifecycle, it is called continuous testing. Now, how does a continuous testing architecture looks? I've already explained you guys, but this is how it looks like. A developer will basically be committing on a version control system, which will basically trigger my continuous integration tool to basically deploy my application on the testing server. If everything goes well on a testing server, it will push it to production. If my testing server fails or my testing fails, the feedback is given back to the developer. And this process is called continuous testing. The process of continuously giving feedback to my developer would again be continuous monitoring. Okay. Now, how does a continuous testing framework usually work, and how is actually automated test created? Let's understand that. Now, the products are built with their test suites, right? And let's say there are X features on my website right now, so there'll be X tests to test each of those features. So if I have feature A, I will have a test suite for feature A as well. When I add a feature B, I will also have to create the test suite for feature B, right? So my automation testing development and my application development goes hand in hand. All right. And as and when all my test cases are complete, let's say developer pushes feature A, the version control system, it will be deployed on the testing server, and then it will be feature A is tested. Similarly, if feature B, when the developer pushes feature B on the version control system, and at the same time you have added feature B to your version control system, your feature B also will be tested. But it is very important to update your testing suites with all the new feature testing as and when the new feature is being developed. Okay, and that would be the end of this session, guys. So continuous testing is nothing but making testing a part of your DevOps lifecycle, right? And then moving forward with it. So how do you test in the DevOps lifecycle? The way you do it is that, let me come back to my clips. So what you do is this is my project test for. What I'll do is I'll right click it and I will click on build. There should be an option for build over here. Yeah, so sorry, there's an option for export over here, right? You'll click on export, and now you want your application to be a runnable jar file. You click on next, it'll create a jar file with test.jar. You click on finish, and now all your dependencies will be packaged into test.jar. Click on yes, and it will say jar export finished with warnings, but warnings doesn't mean that your program will not run. So now you have a workable jar in your computer that you would just have to push on your testing server. So it was in C app, and this is my jar file. Now what I can do is, if I want to run this particular jar file, I'll just have to open command prompt. Let's assume we are in a command mode operating system. I would go into that particular directory, and now I will write java -jar and then test.jar. I'll hit enter, and you'll be able to see that your program execution will happen over here now. Right? Remember, guys, that whatever operating system you are pushing your jar file on, right? You will have to specify the Chrome driver path for that particular machine on which the jar file will run, right? This will not change automatically. This you have to set. So if your testing jar will run on Linux, you will have to specify the path for your Chrome driver on Linux over here, not anything else. Not it will be the path of Chrome driver in your Linux machine. Where does it actually exist? So for example, if it's in /home, let's say it's in /home/ubuntu, and let's say the Chrome driver is over here. So this is how you will specify the path when you want your jar file to run on a Linux machine. Okay.
Why DevOps? Because there was a big fight. There was a group which is primarily development team, which is developing. They were trying to develop very fast. Operations is the name given to the team which takes care of your production. They were trying to keep things stable in production. So whether with waterfall they existed, with agile they existed, but they were always having a fight with each other because development said, take this and put it live because customer wants it now. Operations guy said, no, I'm not sure whether it will work or not. I will check it. And there was a delay and there was a bottleneck and things went down and up. So eventually there was a big problem here. So DevOps as a practice of software development tries to solve so that these teams, not just development and operations, somehow the term is coined in a way as if two teams, but remember in this, the QA, the testing team gets involved, the configuration management, which is the infrastructure tool team, everybody has to play their role to make things go live to production as fast as you can. Okay, so that is the all in all the philosophy. Doesn't matter which tools you use, but try to automate everything, make it continuous so that the only thing is you want to make things go live to production faster, because remember we are in an era where competition is very high. If you remember guys, what happened in India also, there was a time when, I'm not sure whether you have seen it. Okay, let me see this question. How much do you think a person was charged for when mobile got introduced in India for per minute of outgoing? What do you think were the charges in Indian rupees, if you are aware, or whichever country you are part of? And by the way, there was an era when incoming was also charged. Are you aware of that era when incoming used to cost? There was a charge on incoming. Okay. Now you tell me, how much do you pay today for per minute of outgoing and how much for incoming? Today's era, free. And by the way, in data plans also, you remember pre-Geo, Reliance Geo is the operator which did a crazy thing of making data free in India for, like, with their whatever that plan was called, I don't remember, Prime or what it was, where they tried to give 1 year free and all service providers in India cried left and right. But remember, that changed when there were people, at times I have seen my bill used to come around 1,000 rupees and my data connection was like, maybe I was allowed 1 GB in a month. Now you have plans which is not 1 GB a day, it is like 2 GBs a day or 4 GBs, or we talk about daily plans. Earlier that GB quota was for a month only, which is unbelievable. Okay, now people consume that. But anyway, coming back to our philosophy of agile versus DevOps versus waterfall, remember when Geo came and they introduced plans, even Tata Docomo did it, by the way, if anybody remembers. when we are talking about 10 rupees, 16 rupees, are you aware what was the rounding of it? As an example, how many seconds you talk and how do you pay? So there was no per second billing. Okay, even if you talk for 1 second, the rounding was for 1 minute and you will be charged whatever 8 rupees, 16 rupees, 32 rupees or whatever, right? Because rounding was 1 minute. Tata Docomo long back came and they said, we want to be fair to our players, our, let's say our customers. So we will do what is, they introduced per second billing. And they said, doesn't matter, we will charge you. Okay, the charge is like, 60, 100, let's say 60 paisa per minute. But actually we will charge you 1 paisa per second. So overall, if you make call only for 15 seconds, you will be charged only 15 paisa or whatever. Okay, these are some dummy numbers I'm doing, and all other providers were kind of having still per minute rounding, and they were suddenly struggling to keep their customers happy. So eventually they, let's say as an example, they have to introduce the feature of per second billing instead of per minute billing. Now they can't wait for months in waterfall era. Like if they wanted to introduce it tomorrow. Because why tomorrow? They wanted it yesterday, because Tata Docomo has come and they are making a crazy campaign throughout India, on TV, everywhere, social media, that we are the only fair company, per second billing, come to us. And Airtels and the Vodafones of India have to compete with them. They have to introduce, and they cannot wait for months to make this change in their system. So even agile practices, which is weeks, is not going to help them. So they have to come up even faster. So practice, like to whatever extent they can practice even faster movement to production, like DevOps, they had to do. So overall, you can see, yeah, so even Deep says in 2008, my Airtel broadband used to cost 1,000 rupees. Okay, and now you see our bills have technically reduced in current era. People have paid higher bills in the past than today, but do you think service providers have their cost decreased? Surely not. The payments to the employees have increased because diesel petrol is higher. There's inflation, 4G connections, 5G, buying the bandwidth or whatever. The spectrum from Indian government cost them like thousands and thousands of crores of rupees, and they have to make it, and they are becoming a dumb pipe with, okay, anyway, I don't want to go into telecom world problem, but overall, I hope you understood the philosophy of DevOps. What it tries to make everything continuous, whether it is continuous development, something called continuous testing. You keep on deploying continuously, you keep on monitoring all the time, and there is a phase called continuous integration, which means combine all these together, that the moment you code, it gets built, it gets tested, it gets deployed as soon as possible, and you keep on monitoring it all the time. So you will be experiencing all these stages using different tool. Like for continuous development, we will see tool like GitHub. Continuous testing, we will see tool like Selenium. Continuous integration, we will practice through Jenkins. Continuous deployment, we will try through either Ansible or maybe Docker, Kubernetes, and continuous monitoring, maybe with tool like ELK and all that. So you will be seeing all this understanding. So again, guys, I don't want to focus right now on the textbook definition of what is continuous integration, because it has its nuances. When we will reach there, we will try to set context, but right now you can think of in a way that these are the continuous things. You can go over the video. It has all these, okay, which is talking about what is continuous development. Continuous integration, by the way, you can read it. It is mentioned here. It is a critical point. I don't want to read through slides. It is about integrating your different stages and life cycles. Basically, it's building and unit testing your code at a high level and doing automated code review and whatever other things you can do, automated security related testing like Sonar Cube or whatever. So a lot of things comes in continuous integration. We will try to understand it. Once we reach there, we will start with continuous development today. So again, continuous deployment is putting things live into some kind of environment using container technology or whatever. Testing is automation of your testing. Monitoring is trying to see that everything is up and running, and how much ever you try these, guys, this is a very, very risky proposition. I hope all of you are aware. Sometime back, not very long back, few days back, I believe, one of the critical services went down. Does anybody remember what it was? Which service went down? Facebook. Yes, Facebook, and by the way, also WhatsApp, because they are both Mark Zuckerberg's, right? And also Instagram. Actually, all three face downtime due to some issue. So it's not that they are practicing DevOps practices. They are monitoring their system all the time, but mistakes still do happen. And you see, in such a critical era, yeah, this was because of DNS or something. Again, guys, we will not go there as to why it failed, but overall, how much ever tools, technologies you put, continuous development, integration, we have seen Google going down for some time. We have seen Netflix going down again for a very, very limited time, compared to, if you remember, IRCTC, how much that used to be down, the train booking site of India, the popular site. If anybody of you remember how often it used to go down, especially at the time when it should not go down. So in that sense, overall, remember, we have come a long way, but practicing DevOps is not easy. It is very, very expensive also at times. So it's not a cost saving measure. But yes, if your business needs it to stay relevant in the market, that let's say if you want to compete with Geo or Tota Docomo plan, you need to have practices in place that you can introduce plans which are countering them at the earliest. Again, I'm giving you telecom examples overall. So be aware that this is the gist of it, because I don't want to read through these slides. What tools we are going to use for what, eventually they all will come: Ansible, Puppet, Selenium, maybe Nagios, ELK, GitHub, Git, Jenkins. You will see all of them, and I will again try to give you the right context. We'll try to show you very interesting demos. So try to absorb the concept from big level picture and try to adopt it.
All right, so why do we need continuous integration? Let's understand this using an example. So imagine yourself being in a company and where there are three or more developers who have been asked to add features to an already existing website. Right, so in the beginning you all were given version 1 code and you had to work on this code to add your features. So developer